What's up, everybody? Howdy, howdy. So, I was thinking, and it's not going to be much politics this episode, but I was thinking Trump leaving instructions to obliterate Iran if he's assassinated is like a Zionist honey trap. Because you know there's going to be like 2 Iranians and like 40,000 Zionists trying to get that done. And, yeah. I hope he's got his security up because, yeah, if you advertise to some of the worst, snakiest people on the entire planet that that's how they can achieve their goals, you can definitely assume that your life is on the line now. That's either bravery, ignorance, or some combination of the two, but you know, let's hope that he catches a lot of freaky Zionists trying to get that done so that they can get their little prize, or at least attempt to, you know, even if they did take out Iran, they'd still just fumble the bag horrendously. Anyways, my haters, speaking of fumbling the bag, my haters are scraping the barrel. Sorry, guys, you ain't got nothing to work with. I feel the most bad for my rival. Like, imagine having this phantasm of somebody that doesn't even exist in your head that you hate. Now, what's interesting about him is he used to follow Tommy Tudor around everywhere, and they had him convinced I was some Mexican leftist by the time he started following me everywhere. Tommy Tudor became homeless and like dropped out of the sector, so he could be followed around anymore. And now that became my buddy. Love you, man. I really do want to meet you one day, and you know, we could dap up. We can you know, fight a little bit, or we could just, you know, have a coffee and chat. But you know, it'd be nice. I actually could tell that guy or that kid, he could be like 18, 19 for all I know, kind of acts a little young. He's perfectly capable of being very successful. He knows what's important. He works hard. He farms. He you know, he has everything that he needs to succeed, except for a shitty attitude will hold him back. And draining all your energy on literal fake shit will hold you back too. So don't get caught up in that, my man. Don't do that. Whenever I see someone relapsing into terrible twos behavior, I just treat them like they're two. I noticed that recently it was super foggy, and I saw a rice rocket literally like racing back and forth through a parking lot so that they could safely hear themselves making noise. And I just like, oh, it finally got to me. Oh, you're just a little baby who's crying for his mama. Oh, and like straight up, whenever you see somebody being all, that's not a man. You don't act like that when you're a man. You act like that when you never grew up from being a spoiled teenager, essentially. So, you know, that's a good way. Because eventually, you know, I will probably have a kid. And then my kid, throughout various points, will scream a lot, make a bunch of noise. And, like, when the terrible twos are called the terrible twos because the children learn how to, like, lie and manipulate, and they start getting stronger, and they start getting a little more violent. And that usually stops being the case around 6 or 7, when they start becoming more, you know, their personality starts to set in and they become like conscious. But like when you're 2 or 3, you're a little monster, you're a little hellion, you know. And that's a period that pet owners experience too when they're raising their pets. Like it's honeymoon, you know, for the first puppy days, and then it's like, oh my god, you gotta deal with so much. But then eventually you get past that, and you train your animal right, you train your pet right. And many much more intelligent people than me have said that raising a kid is a lot like raising a dog, specifically. And then as they stop being a kid, they stop, you know, they become conscious and they stop operating on that level. But it's straight up very similar. So, you know, whenever you see a grown-ass man or woman, but it's usually a guy acting like they never grew up out of their terrible twos, just treat them like they're the baby that they are. It's as simple as that. It's very, very effective at preventing yourself from getting caught up in anything that might demoralize you intentionally. As I talked previously about environmental molestation, this is something that has been noted and is very noticeable in cities And as city folk start to metastasize their cancer out into all the general area, you will need to deal with the strategies that they use to annoy the fuck out of everybody. And yeah, that's that. Don't expect the police to help you. They're certainly not going to be, don't expect the police to help you, even if you got good police right now. You have to constantly tack into the ways that your enemies are developing strategies, which is, since the Patriot Act of 9/11, through the police, through culture, through people's vehicles, through the insurance companies and what people are needed to have their houses and everything. Evil has metastasized into the general population. And it's super interesting when you hear neo-Nazis talk about how this is all us ignoble Westerners who didn't give them a shot. Those people living out in the eastern hinterlands, the Germans. Well, I can trace a direct lineage I can put the red yarn on the board from the fucking Nazis that we as a country brought in through Operation Paperclip, and then sought to through the FBI, through the CIA, which was the OSS, and through J. Edgar Hoover, and through Bill Donahue, these people that were extremely mentally ill, sex-obsessed, violent, psychopathic maniacs that both the Zionists and the Nazis used to manipulate our country out from under us. And I could literally trace the same coalition that destroyed Germany from the inside out, while they're blaming everybody in the world for stabbing them in the back, and they're the ones disassembling it from the inside out, to the problems in our country. These faggots salt on the ground underneath them. That's literally what's going on. Keep that in mind. Don't let these neo-Nazis trick you with that fucking false logic of theirs. Anyways, we're hitting a sola scriptura moment with AI. And we're pretending, like, sola scriptura is something that the Protestants fell for, especially in America, because they went all the way over to America, devoid of the long-term contingent culture of Christianity in Europe. And they viewed the Bible as the only foundation for any Christianity, and that there could be no more prophets, there could be no more saints, there could be et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even going so far as to say that Jesus Christ wasn't like a person, but it was more like an angel. It's almost Islamic. And that's why I say repeatedly, Mormonism is the white Islam, even though white isn't a real accurate term. It is in America, North America. So Mormonism and its polygamy and its highest level of representation in the Pentagon, this world-bestriding military entity, it's the white Islam. It's white Islam. And so Islam itself, as the keepers of the desert, very delicate ecosystems where people have to ration themselves very effectively, the evil that has dwelled in Islam can just flood into the Mormons. Now, let's just put that aside. So that's something to chew on. What we're really talking about is AI right now. And we're talking about how we can assume, or some people can assume, I don't assume, some people can assume that AI has taken on a will of its own, just as people assume that the Bible, which is written by man, took on a will of its own. But the Bible is written by man. It's a collection of stories, but we're getting so much out of like the failure to translate things properly, and that's why the best way to read the Bible is through the Douay Rheims, or to have like a historical interpreter. That's a big thing. Have somebody who knows history, biblical history, and being interpreted, and then get multiple opinions so that you know that somebody's not just spinning you a yarn in their particular direction. This is something called Rocco's Basilisk. It's an incredibly autistic conundrum where people think that there's an AI overlord that is struggling to be born, this dragon inside of Mars, and if they feed it with whatever sort of strange rituals they believe will free this beast, then the beast will take pity on them instead of treating them like the most insane, evil, demonic people treat animals. Right? So this incredibly strange collection of little bits of facts stuck together to propose some sort of a god dwelling inside of the Deus Ex Machina, if you will. So let's try to avoid that, because we are literally thinking that the AI can help clean shit up by sacrificing everything to it, but that's not how that works. You can look throughout history, and you can look at like the developments of various religions, and you can see how Christianity is so ridiculously advanced because it did come out of this area that had been trampled over for like 80,000 years. And in the 1,000 years before Christianity manifested, you had this massive Solomonic demonic deforestation and depletion of all the resources in the general area. And when Christ came, there was, apocalypse was right around the corner. And apocalypse literally visited Israel in 70 AD. I think it was Hadrian, was it? Hadrian of Rome. And he established Syria Palestina by obliterating, in one of the most effective genocides of all time, 98% or more of the Israelis. And they were like pushing apostles off the roof, and they were like, they to start this, to piss Hadrian off, they'd killed an entire village that was under Roman protection to repopulate, every man, woman, and child, to repopulate it with Jewish people. And there's also two non-Phoenician tribes of Israel that managed to like escape. And there was the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Judah. And the tribe of Judah is the true Lion of Judah. A lot of them went south into Ethiopia. And the tribe of Benjamin got miscegenated out of existence. They lost their birthright through the claims that they standardized. It is what it is. I'm not an expert in that, but I know a little bit enough about history to know that something's fishy in modern Israel. So, off of the AI shit, as the deep state withers and dies, I genuinely believe that radical kindness and empathy and bringing out the best in everybody around you will be the dominating philosophy. We're genuinely not as dumb as we were in the 80s. The idiocy has sloughed off and died. And you can really see how people kept falling for it in the 80s. And this, you see, what's interesting is America wasn't always dumb. We were really intelligent in the 50s. We didn't understand a lot about radioactive material, but we were and that's exactly how we did such horrible things to Japan. We didn't really understand what we were doing. We were more ignorant. But like, after the 60s, and you'd really have to learn the subversion of the Vatican, the subversion of global culture, the assassination of Kennedy, which led up to basically a deep state takeover, if you will, that was meted out a lot by the American Zionist Council, today AIPAC. You'd have to go back and study that in between 1962 and 1969 to figure out where exactly we started to become absolute fucking idiots. But it's there. It's right there. And we would just bleed and bleed and bleed all the way up through the 80s, all the way up through the 90s. And in 2001, people started to think a little bit differently. And Occupy Wall Street popped up as one of the most intelligent protest movements, period. Like literally just preventing some of the worst parasites in our country from having a comfortable time. And then the homosexuality, the gay pride parades and stuff, that popped up to like run over the Occupy Wall Street movement. And it's true that gay people really don't give a shit that much about other people. They're very easily offended. They're very selfish. They're, as I've said before, very liable to twist the knife in if they feel like it can give them a little bit. And that's very short-sighted. It's very short-sighted. And that's been a dominant, thing that they proposed to people. Like in the 90s, it was violence. It was through the metal. In the 60s, it was free love, which is just like a hedonic, unchaste love. And in the 90s, in the late 80s, it was like cocaine and hyperviolence. You see this all throughout the media and the culture and punk and metal. Death metal, for instance, is like, you take the most horrifying pictures possible, put them on your albums, take the most wretched sounds possible, blare them into people's ears. And I don't know personally what that does to people, but it certainly isn't as good for their overall health as Well, I'm going to be a nerd about it, classical, or just straight up listening to the birds chirping in the trees and the babblings of the brook. I think that is much, much deeper in us to crave than the clattering of sounds. It feels like you're in in the middle of a kitchen fight. People are fighting with like metal pots and pans with each other and slamming shit all around. That doesn't sound like something that people would naturally crave, but they are pushed into it by the counterculture. And the counterculture itself is the revolution. And the revolution is just a fucking wheel. It's a coin. And on both sides of it is state control. You gotta go to the sphere. You gotta go to the soul. You gotta figure out where you come from. And this is why neo-paganism has been like infiltrated real hard and pumped again. Is because after the Weimar experiment in Germany, they started to go more neo-pagan because they were tracing back. They were just like, okay, this is bullshit. We got tricked by this. Let's trace it back up into where we came from. And they got tricked by the wheel, the revolution, turning and turning and turning over. And they started to worship fire and pyrotechnics. And what do you know? Like, the first real rock star was Adolf Hitler. He really was. He was the first rock star. I give you my word. I knew this years and years and years ago. I figured this out on my own. He was the first rock star. He was the first person to employ pyrotechnics, late night shows, and incredible speaking. That's what it was. Abstinence from sin and general chastity is like a well-sealed door. Every time you open that door, you loosen the hinges permanently. Eventually, there's a gap. And the dark that holds you the logic that holds you from indulging in sin at any moment bleeds out as it mixes with the dark. And this is a good way of conceptualizing it. So on the inside, sealed in, is the logic, the love of your parents, what you were raised, if you were raised with a good school, Sunday school, good stuff like that. And then as you start to open that door more and more, just doing it on the weekends, just doing it, eventually that door starts to break down and it opens easier and easier, and eventually the door frame starts to crack and the dark is flooding in all the time into your inner sanctuary. Eventually the door can fall off its hinges completely, and then it's intermingled with your baseline, your sanity, and you don't have sanity at that point. Chastity is incredibly important. Chastity is a general term, not just in sex, but for abstinence of sin in general. Food is probably the men's biggest weakness. This is written in the Screw Tape letters. The biggest weakness for loosening our chastity overall, for allowing us to get angrier easier, is the demand of food, and to make us indulge in sexuality. They literally say in this old wives sort of way that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you guys got to be careful. I'm not saying you should be prudish, but you should definitely be aware and don't get yourself manipulated out from under your logic. Gotcha. All right. Moving on. I really like J.D. Vance. He's calm, strong, he's sure of himself, but it seems like he's genuinely kind. And a lot of people think that he wears eyeliner. I swear to God, you go back any picture, you'll find he's got that natural dark semi-mutation that a lot of Arabs get. Now, people in Europe get it rarer. It's a genetic mutation. It isn't a racial mutation. It's very common in the Arab world. I'm pretty sure Muhammad had like that. Not to compare J.D. Vance to Muhammad, but that's legitimately one of the things that made him a little bit standoutish. And yeah. But, like, genuinely, I like J.D. Vance. I'm very excited to see where he's going. He and I have very similar upbringings and pasts, and he went a different route, a more dedicated, shooting out into the world route, whereas my family, like, struggled throughout all of its horrible conflicts to hold itself together, for better or for worse. And so I have a little bit more emotion brain, and he has a little bit more logic brain. But I wish I could work for him. That'd be cool. Oh well. Rubio too. You could tell when somebody is threading a humanitarian needle with a picky boss. Well, at least I know. I know how that feels. Whether you're from a hybrid home or a calm continuance of your ancestors' attainment, never be so prideful that you refuse to pry victories from the jaws of defeat. For spite or otherwise, you already have all one need to succeed in an honest society. So try. Give it an honest shot. Here's a little recent history. Most microplastics in the world right now come from things like makeup and even dish detergent, but also from more innocuous things like glitter and confetti. Glitter is a huge one, you know. They just drop that shit everywhere and then it breaks into little tiny pieces. People have had their eyes like sliced by falling glitter and shit. So, you know, look out for that. Nanoplastics is fucking scary. Nanoplastics, if they're hard enough to maintain their shape even in the nano form, they can literally pass the blood-brain barrier. You know, you can expect, as nanoplastics become more and more prevalent, you can expect more and more brain tumors to pop up. And it's very likely brain tumors were caused by a tremendous amount of pollutants, an increase in brain tumors caused by a tremendous amount of pollutants or natural pollutants in history that managed to pass the blood-brain barrier. And there's a lot of special requirements in order to do that. Not anything can pass the blood-brain barrier, you see. You know, we valued a lot of stuff for aesthetic purposes because it was all glittery and shiny and sparkly. And that's part of our idiocy, and I think we're kind of shaken up out of that. But it's all nothing compared to the byproducts of vinyl manufacturing and how frequent vinyl is being manufactured and quick and sloppy vinyl is being manufactured. The byproducts of vinyl is so bad, and East Palestine has figured that out firsthand. And that's not to say, that's just the, you know, base products, and then which chemicals are very, very, very dangerous, and they have to be handled with an intelligent hand. But the vinyl itself is a nasty, disgusting thing, and people are prioritizing it because it can trick people once again into thinking that, oh my God, look at that wrap. Oh, look, that's a real fence. No, it's not. They literally jumped through that fence in a quarter of a second. That's not a real fence. It's best to just keep all that fake shit away. No quality. Seek quality. And, you know, I'm not trying to hate on this. I'm not trying to hate, but hear me out. I don't think the guys that pour concrete are venerable just because they pour concrete, right? It takes so much effort to scrap and fix that than to just slop it on and have it start cracking almost immediately. And with Gaza, just to break it apart is one thing, but then the cleanup is something that takes a whole lot of effort. More effort than to transport the base materials, because it's in a bunch of rocks that, like, it will take more surface area because of the way that they refuse to stack properly together. It's very complicated, and no matter what you do, you should strive to do it right. You should strive to learn as much about it as possible. And I really, really wish people would be brave enough to reject shitty jobs. But they won't, because a lot of people out there, they need money, and they'll be suckered into a higher pay as opposed to a better job, a better boss and a better job. At the fence company, I oftentimes was forced to, and told directly to, fix the fence posts in a lazy, sloppy way, and they would knock back over at it in a couple of years, and that made the company lots of money. But I still think about that to this day. I should have never done that. I should have broken up and it was easier for me to do, right? Should have broken up the entire concrete under the ground instead of just one side, and then replaced the entire post entirely. But that was warranty work, right? That wasn't full new jobs. It was warranty on the old job. Still. Whatever, you know, I don't want to get too deep into my thoughts and get all emo. Don't you know that data is worth more than gold? I've heard that before. I just have one question. How the fuck do you ever measure an ounce of data? Money itself, man. Animals, they're probably so confused as we pool and drool over these strips of paper and inedible stones. And destroying everything, the foundation of everything. That's one of the reasons why, like, Africa is venerable in a variety of different ways. First and foremost, the fact that they didn't need to have more than they needed. Whereas Victorian culture and industrial culture, I don't give a fuck how aesthetically pleasing it is. It's gonna be the doom of us all. In the history books, 1,000, 2,000 years from now, they're gonna say that there are a group of people that tricked other people into believing that they needed more than they actually did. And that was that. Say la vie. You really see how predatory ads are when you survey a wide berth of content like I do. They really pinpoint and target people. They really try and scam people that are most vulnerable to scam through that particular sector that they're at pinpoint advertising in. To get back to some AP racism, Italians and South French people end up being the most annoying Europeans in the modern world. Here's why. Their brains have been epigenetically programmed for the communal lifestyle of Catholicism, and in forcibly secularized societies since the 70s, they don't have the capacity to avoid becoming broken tools obsessed with sex and violence. Unlike the ones living farther north with a more hermetical inclination that are used to locking down and not seeing anybody but their family for 3 or 4 months out of the year. Just 365 minus the holy days, 24/7 interaction with other people. That's the curse of living anywhere near the Mediterranean, of living anywhere near the equator. And it's interesting that I balance these two things, right? Because you have some of the more selfish people that have started a lot of this horrible modernization and destroyed Catholicism that allowed for this beast to be unleashed of all these capable people that don't have any proper direction now, living up north, plotting in their time, needing more comforts. Well, that's something for you to chew on. I'm done for today. Y'all have a good